As Prince Ukandu couldn't lift the ancestral staff, he was shocked and couldn't believe his eyes. He had paid a large bribe to the high priest, expecting to easily lift the sacred staff and be crowned the new king. But somehow, the plan had failed spectacularly in front of the entire crowd. Ukandu tried with all his might, but the staff would not budge an inch from its resting place. The high priest watched in shock and disbelief as his secret deal with the prince unraveled before him. How could this be happening after all the spells and charms he had cast to guarantee Ukandu's success? Sweat beaded on his brow as he frantically tried to understand what could have gone wrong. Ukandu whirled around, fury etched on his face. In a booming voice laced with rage, he confronted the high priest. "After all the money I paid you, you deceitful snake, you assured me this would work. How could you have failed me like this?" The high priest shrank back, afraid of Ukandu's wrath, but also fearful of being exposed for his corrupt actions. Thinking quickly, he raised a placating hand. "Please, my prince, stay calm. There must have been some error in the preparation. Give me a moment to investigate what could be amiss." From across the crowd, Chief Uzo watched the confrontation with a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He could sense the intricate weaving of destiny finally taking shape as it should. Ukandu had tried to circumvent the will of the ancestors through dishonest means, and now he was paying the price for his arrogance. As the disgraced prince and high priest tried to regain their composure, Chief Uzo stepped forward. In a clear, measured voice, he addressed them. "Prince Ukandu, you have had your chance and failed honorably. It is time to step aside so the last participant may take his turn with a humble heart." He gestured to Arins, who still stood stunned at having been the final person called. The high priest's mouth went dry as he realized the unavoidable truth. If Arins succeeded where Ukandu could not, there would be no explaining away his deceit. Visions of severe punishment flashed through his mind, making his stomach churn. But the high priest knew he had no choice but to allow the proceedings to continue as protocol demanded. Swallowing hard, he managed a small nod to Prince Ukandu. "The healer is correct. Step away so the final testing may commence." Ukandu opened his mouth to protest, verdant eyes bulging with outrage. But one stern look from Chief Uzo quelled any outburst before it could begin. Shoulders slumped in bitter defeat, Ukandu moved aside, shooting daggers at the high priest as he passed. The way forward was clear, though neither man wanted to accept the path it revealed. Arins felt rooted to the spot, his heart thundering in his chest. He didn't understand the tension charging the air, but he could sense this moment carrying enormous weight. As Ukandu stepped aside, leaving Arinze alone in front of the multitudes, the high priest finally spoke the words he had been dreading. "You," he started, voice cracking slightly before regaining its authority. "You are the last person to be tested today. Step forward and attempt to lift the ancient staff before you. If you succeed where all others have failed, you will be declared the true heir to the throne." Arinze's breath caught in his throat as the immense significance of those words washed over him. He slowly turned to look at his father, eyes wide with unspoken questions, but Chief Uzo's face was serene, tinged with pride. With an almost imperceptible nod, he gave his son the courage to proceed. Steeling himself, Arinze faced front once more and began walking forward with purposeful strides. His calloused hands tingled with anticipation as he neared the ornately carved staff. The solitary journey across the sprawling courtyard seemed to stretch endlessly as the eyes of thousands followed his every step. When at last Arinze stood before the ancient totem, he paused for the span of several heartbeats. Then, placing his hands around the smooth wooden shaft, Arinze gave a firm tug, looking at it intently. A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes were upon him. With a deep breath, Arinze grasped the smooth wood and gave it a firm pull upwards. To everyone's amazement, the sacred staff lifted from its resting place with ease, as if it weighed nothing at all. Prince Ukandu's face contorted in disbelief and shame. How could this common drummer boy villager accomplish what he could not, despite all his schemes and bribery? Princess Adan watched with wide eyes, collapsing to the ground, as shame and regret washed over her. King Chukwuemeka, however, looked on with a satisfied smile, as if he had expected this all along. Arinze himself could scarcely believe what was happening. He stared at the staff in his hands, a wave of mixed emotions crashing over him. Shock, confusion, a strange sense of destiny unfurling. Slowly, he turned to face his father, Chief Uzo, desperate for answers to the 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. As their eyes met, Chief Uzo arose and began walking towards his son, a warm smile spreading across his weathered features. When he reached Arinze, he placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. In a voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering, he spoke, "Yes, you are the true king over all 5 kingdoms, as foretold by the ancestors." Arinze's brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of his father's words. "But how can this be? Why have you kept such a monumental secret from me all these years?" Chief Uzo gave his son's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I know you must have many questions, but first, you must cease calling me father, for I am not your true father." A collective gasp rose from the crowd at this shocking admission. Arinze felt the world shift beneath his feet as Chief Uzo continued. "You are of royal blood, the firstborn son of our late king, the true heir we have awaited through many years of turmoil and uncertainty." He looked at Arinze with immense pride and sadness intermingled on his careworn face. "I vowed to your mother to keep you safe by keeping the truth of your birthright hidden until the right time. The ancestors have spoken, and that time is now." Arinze could scarcely process this world-altering revelation. He, a humble village drummer, was actually the king's firstborn son and rightful heir to the throne. His mind raced. The old healer then began relaying the long and painful story of how he had come to rescue Arinze as a newborn and raise him in secret to protect him. "No, Arinze, I'm not your real father. The late king was your biological father. Let me tell you what happened." The people listened closely as Uzo began. "Many years ago, when the late king was a young prince, he did something terrible. He forced himself on a woman from a village and left her pregnant and alone." Uzo paused, letting his words sink in. When the woman found out she was going to have a baby, she went to the palace to tell the prince, but his parents threatened to kill her if anyone found out. Uzo shook his head sadly. The prince's parents tried to give the woman money to get rid of the child and leave, but she refused because of the shame. She didn't take the money and ran away to live alone in the forest. Months later, when the woman went into labor in the forest, I was nearby collecting herbs. I heard her cries and went to help her, and I helped her have her baby boy. Uzo looked at Arinze warmly. "It was you, Arinze. The woman told me who your father was. She made me promise to keep you away from the royal family to protect both of you. Then, she passed away because of problems from giving birth." The crowd murmured as Uzo continued. "I raised you as my own son to keep my promise to your birth mother. I loved and cared for you while keeping the secret about your true family." Arinze's eyes widened at this shocking news about where he came from. The crowd got quiet, surprised by this dark past. Arinze tried to understand all he had just learned about his background. Finally, he spoke again. "Father, I don't know what to say. You gave up everything and carried this heavy burden to keep me safe." Uzo replied gently, "You've shown yourself to be a good and fair man, worthy of being the kingdom's true leader. That's always been my biggest hope for you, my son." The high priest stood in confused silence, unsure of what to do next. According to sacred tradition, he had to officially acknowledge the one chosen by the ancestors to be the High King over all 5 kingdoms. Swallowing hard, he lifted his ceremonial staff high. "Hear me, all people," the high priest's voice rang out. "By the power vested in me by our revered ancestors, I now command everyone, kings, queens, princes, princesses, and all subjects, to bow before the one true ruler who has been revealed today." A hushed silence fell over the crowd as the high priest's words hung in the air. Slowly, one by one, the assembled monarchs and noble leaders began to lower themselves to the ground in a show of loyalty and respect. King Chukwuemeka was among the first, going down on one knee before Arinze with his head bowed in deference. Princess Adan, who had just regained consciousness after collapsing from shock, looked around in confusion at the unfolding scene. Her ladies-in-waiting quickly explained what was happening, that Arinze, the man whose love she had so callously discarded years before, was the prophesied true king. With no choice but to follow protocol, Adan felt shame burn her cheeks as she too lowered herself before her former love. Even the disgraced Prince Ukandu had no option but to awkwardly bend his knee to the ground, eyes downcast as he surrendered to the divine will of the ancestors. The arrogant prince who had scoffed at the humble Arinze now faced the harsh reality that all his schemes and negative intentions meant nothing in the grand scheme. As the entire gathering remained in a reverential kneel, Arinze stood in the center, dumbstruck. He had gone from a simple village drummer to the ruler of all 5 kingdoms in a blind rush of revelation. Gripping the ancestral staff tightly, he looked around at the joined leaders and citizens awaiting his command. But he found himself at a loss for words or actions. Arinze had spent his life in modest simplicity, never being groomed for leadership or trained in regal comportment. In this pivotal moment of his destiny unveiling, he felt overwhelmingly underprepared and unsure of what to do next. His eyes finally landed on the high priest, who gave him an encouraging nod. "They await your order to rise, Your Majesty," the priest said gently. "You need only give the word." Arinze finally managed to find his voice amidst the swirling chaos of his emotions. Yes, you may. Please stand," he called out, the words feeling clumsy on his tongue. As one, the crowd rose back to their feet, but their eyes now held a level of awe and reverence that had not been present before. Arinze was keenly aware of the newfound weight of his every move, every utterance taking on cosmic significance. As everyone stood up after bowing to Arinze, Prince Ukandu could not contain his anger and humiliation any longer. He abruptly turned and stormed away from the coronation event, heading straight for the high priest's residence. Ukandu would make the deceitful holy man answer for his failure to keep their corrupt bargain. Meanwhile, after the shocking revelation, Arinze found himself overwhelmed with emotion. He tightly embraced Chief Uzo, the man who had raised him as his own son despite the secret of his true parentage. The high priest stepped forward again, letting his ceremonial staff slam against the ground to regain everyone's attention. In a booming voice meant to carry to every ear, he made a proclamation. "Hear me, people of the 5 kingdoms. Let it be known from this day forth that Arinze is the one true High King, chosen by divine right to rule over all lands and their sovereign leaders. He turned to face the newly crowned Aranza. According to sacred tradition, you must now undergo 3 full cycles of the market days while partaking in ritual purification, offerings to the ancestors, and formal blessings to prepare your spirit for the immense duties ahead. The high priest looked at Arinze with a mixture of reverence and understanding. He knew this was an overwhelming transition from humble villager to supreme ruler. Until that time, you shall reside within the royal palace quarters, befitting your newfound station. A full contingent of the kingdom's most elite guardsmen will be at your service as well. Arinze's head swam from the rapid changes being set into motion. Looking at Chief Uzo, who had been more of a father to him than he could have ever realized, he felt a flicker of fear at being separated from his soul forefather. But the wise healer simply smiled and gave a slight nod, silently assuring Arinze that this was all part of the destiny which had been preordained long ago. Forcing his voice to remain steady despite his inner turbulence, Arinze politely declined the high priest's offer. With respect, I wish to remain with my father for the time being while these events take shape. The ancestors will guide me where I need to be. He glanced at the cluster of heavily armed royal guards waiting at the perimeter. Please, have the palace escort depart for now. When the time comes for me to assume my duties in full, I will send word. The high priest looked mildly surprised at Arinze's requests, but he recovered quickly with an understanding nod. As you wish, Your Majesty. We shall defer to your wisdom in this transitional period. He turned back to address the assembled crowd one final time. Let the message go forth across all lands. Our new High King Arinze has been divinely chosen. All must pay homage and pledge loyalty to his noble rule. A thunderous cheer went up from the multitudes as they acclaimed their new sovereign. As the high priest arrived home, he saw Prince Ukandu already waiting in his residence. Ukandu didn't even give the priest a chance to get settled, immediately shouting at the top of his voice in anger. Explain what just happened at the coronation event. After all the money, gold, silver and cowries I paid you, you still took my wealth and deceived me. The high priest tried to calm Ukandu down. Please, be patient, my prince. There must have been some mistake somewhere, but there is another way we can eliminate Arinze before his coronation day. He reminded Ukandu that Arinze had declined having royal guards assigned to protect him for the time being. That gives us an opportunity to plot against him and kill him stealthily in the forest when he is alone. Upon hearing this plan, Ukandu felt relieved and became calm again. Together, the high priest and the disgraced prince began plotting how to secretly murder Arinze before he could officially be crowned the High King over all 5 kingdoms. Unfortunately, the high priest's son, who had previously undermined his father's corrupt deal with Ukandu by switching out the ancestral staff, was not around this time to overhear their sinister new scheme against Arinze's life. The high priest revealed his idea to Ukandu. We must act quickly before the rituals to officially install Arinze begin. If he undergoes the sacred ceremonies and blessings, killing him afterwards could bring terrible consequences from the ancestors' spirits. Ukandu nodded grimly. What do you propose? I will do whatever is necessary to claim my rightful place as ruler, no matter who stands in my way. Stroking his beard thoughtfully, the high priest explained, during the 3 market day cycles before coronation, Arinze will need to make solitary journeys into the forest to perform private rituals and collect ceremonial items. We can hire skilled assassins to ambush and kill him while he is alone on one of those trips. A cruel smile crept across Ukandu's face at the idea. Yes, that could work perfectly. He will be defenseless without any guards. We must move swiftly before he is too fortified within the palace walls." As the plan took shape, Ukandu felt his confidence returning. "With Arinze permanently removed, you can simply claim there was some mistake in crowning him," he said to the high priest. "I will make sure you are properly compensated again for enabling my ascension this time." The high priest gave a small bow. "It would be my honor to correct this injustice and see the true heir installed on the throne, Your Majesty." Their sinister pact resealed, Ukandu departed the residence in higher spirits. He was convinced this brutal solution would soon put him back on his preordained path to kingship. Little did the arrogant prince and the corrupt holy man realize their nefarious plot had potentially much bigger consequences than simply killing the newly discovered Arinze. Meanwhile, Princess Adan had to be helped out of the coronation event grounds by her maids-in-waiting. She was paralyzed with shock and regret, unable to move on her own. Adan was filled with deep remorse for how she had callously thrown away the true treasure of Arinze's unconditional love in a foolish pursuit of material wealth and status years ago. Seeing her humble former lover revealed as the divinely chosen High King over all 5 kingdoms was almost too much for Adan to comprehend. She could scarcely believe her eyes that the drummer boy she had discarded for the arrogant Prince Ukandu was now being crowned, the supreme ruler appointed by the ancestors themselves. As Adana remained frozen, her mouth agape in disbelief, her maids had to physically carry her from the coronation grounds. She was in such a dazed, catatonic state from the mind-boggling turn of events that she couldn't even walk on her own. The regretful princess's troubling inner turmoil had rendered her almost comatose. With great effort, Adan's ladies-in-waiting managed to bring her back to the palace and lay her in her private chambers. They carefully positioned her on the luxurious bed, fearing she may have hit her head from the severity of her collapse. But it quickly became clear Adan's condition was purely an emotional and psychological shock. She had simply lost all consciousness from the overpowering wave of guilt and remorse crashing over her psyche. Try as they might, none of Adan's loyal maids could rouse her to respond or speak even a single word about her troubling state. Her mouth hung open, but no sounds came out except anguished gasps and murmurs, as memories of her terrible decision to abandon Arinze's love surely tormented her subconscious mind. Resigning themselves that only time could heal such profound inner trauma, the maids carefully made Adan as comfortable as possible, propped up on the silken bed coverings. They tended to her with cool cloths for her feverish brow and sips of water, watching over her worriedly as she remained essentially comatose from the shocking revelations. All through the night and into the next morning, Princess Adan laid in that paralyzed, unconscious state, haunting visions of what could have been if she had only accepted Arinze's pure love played over and over again behind her sealed eyelids. She was trapped in an endless cycle of regret, forced to confront how deeply she had wronged the noble man who had given her everything, only to be callously cast aside for fleeting vanities. When the first rays of dawn's light finally crept through Adan's bedroom windows, her eyelids fluttered slightly, showing the faintest signs of rejoining the waking world. A pained moan escaped her lips as she slowly drifted back to consciousness, instantly overwhelmed again by the harsh reality she now faced. Arinze, her one true love whom she had so foolishly thrown over, was now her ruler, her king, chosen by divine forces she had doubted and disobeyed through her arrogance. As Adan's eyes opened fully for the first time since collapsing at the coronation, they were haunted, hollow, a window into the fractured remains of her soul. The next agonizing step of her journey was only just beginning, as she seriously reckoned with the full, devastating consequences of her past prideful choices and turned her back on purity for the illusion of material glory. On the morning after the shocking coronation event, Prince Ukandu summoned his 3 most loyal and trusted guards to a secret chamber. These humble men had been trained alongside the prince in the ways of leadership and were equally angered by the unexpected turn of events that saw the simple drummer Arinze revealed as the true heir to the throne. Ukandu had often used these guards to carry out his more nefarious deeds in the past, whether it was harming someone who opposed him or extracting revenge through violence. As the 3 burly men arrived, Ukandu's face was contorted with rage and humiliation over having the crown snatched away from his grasp. "You saw what happened out there," Ukandu spat, barely able to contain his fury. "That fool drummer Arinze has somehow been deceived into thinking he can take my rightful place as king over all the kingdoms." The guards nodded grimly, anger simmering behind their eyes as well. After explaining how he had paid a hefty bribe to the high priest to ensure his success at the staff-lifting ceremony, only to have the plan fail inexplicably, Ukandu made it clear what needed to be done. "We cannot allow this injustice to stand," he declared, slamming his fist on the table before them. "Arinze must be eliminated before the next market day, when he is set to undergo sacred rituals and be officially crowned." The guards exchanged wary glances, but remained silent, awaiting further instructions from their disgraced prince. Ukandu began strategizing how they could secretly ambush and kill Arinze during one of the ritual forest journeys he would need to take prior to his coronation day. "From what I know of the ancient traditions, the so-called king will have to venture into the forests alone at times to collect ceremonial items and make spiritual offerings," Ukandu explained. "That will be our perfect opportunity to strike while he is away from the palace's protection." As the sinister plot took shape, one of the burlier guards spoke up. "But my prince, if we kill the man who lifted the sacred staff and was proclaimed the ancestors' chosen one, would that not bring grave consequences upon us all?" Ukandu shook his head defiantly. "I will not allow some village nobody to simply walk in and take what is rightfully mine through some cosmic trickery. He must be removed from the path permanently so I can finally claim my destined place as High King." The guards seemed hesitant, but ultimately vowed their allegiance and obedience, for they had been indoctrinated by Ukandu's family since birth. As the conspiratorial meeting concluded, Ukandu instructed them to keep watch on Arinze's movements and be prepared to strike at a moment's notice when the opportune time revealed itself. In the days that followed, the high priest oversaw Arinze's participation in the preliminary rituals and ceremonial purification rites in preparation for his upcoming coronation day. Arinze remained conflicted through it all, still grappling with the burden of his newfound role while yearning for the simplicity of his former life under Chief Uzo's guidance. As the first market day cycle came and went, it soon became clear to Ukandu that his opportunity might arrive sooner than expected. With only 6 days remaining until Arinze's scheduled crowning, the high priest informed the bitter prince that a key ritual required the soon-to-be king to journey alone into the forest to retrieve sacred ceremonial items. Ukandu quickly summoned his 3 loyal guards again, his eyes alight with venom and desperation. "This is it," he told them grimly. "We cannot allow Arinze to complete this forest ritual and be officially installed as the ruler over our lands." Leaning over a crude map of the forest trails, Ukandu began tracing out a strategic ambush point with his fingertip. "We will lie in wait at this fork here, along the path Arinze is destined to take tomorrow at dawn's first light to gather ingredients for the ceremonies. When he is alone and at his most vulnerable, The prince looked up, and the guards saw a terrifying mix of resolve and madness burning in his obsessive eyes. "That is when we will strike without mercy and eliminate this false king before his unlawful reign can even begin." Meanwhile, Princess Adan was consumed by regret and remorse for her past actions. She retreated to her private chambers, lost in thought about the grave mistake she had made by abandoning Arinze's pure love for the pursuit of wealth and status with Prince Ukandu. As she lay on her luxurious bed, Adan's mind wandered back to her childhood, revisiting the selfish and cruel deeds she had committed from a young age. She remembered how she would mistreat her servants and maids, demanding they cater to her every whim without any kindness or gratitude in return. Tears streamed down Adan's face as she realized the extent of her wrongdoings over the years. She had been consumed by greed and a sense of entitlement, never considering the feelings of those around her. But now, witnessing Arinze's humble nobility being rewarded by the ancestors, Adan knew she had to change her ways. With a newfound determination, Adan called for her maids and servants to gather in her chambers. As they entered, she surprised them all by kneeling down before them, a gesture of humility and repentance. Adan said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I have treated you all with such disrespect and cruelty for far too long. I was blinded by my own selfishness and failed to see the humanity in each of you." The maids and servants exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of how to respond to their princess's unexpected display of vulnerability. "I beg you all to forgive me," Adan continued, tears streaming down her face. "I know I have caused you immense pain and suffering, and I can never undo the harm I have caused. But from this day forward, I vow to treat each of you with the kindness and respect you deserve." The maids rushed forward, trying to urge Adan to stand, but she refused, insisting on remaining on her knees until she had apologized to each and every one of them individually. As the hours passed, Adan poured her heart out, expressing deep remorse for her past actions and pleading for forgiveness. One by one, her servants, touched by her sincerity, embraced her and offered their forgiveness. From that day on, Adan transformed into a new person. She began to treat her servants not as subordinates, but as friends and equals. She showered them with gifts and kindness, determined to make amends for her past transgressions. Adan's newfound humility and compassion became evident to all who encountered her. She opened her chambers to commoners, accommodating them with the same warmth and hospitality she had once reserved only for the nobility. As word of Adan's transformation spread throughout the kingdom, people marveled at the change in her demeanor. She had gone from a selfish and entitled princess to a woman who embodied true nobility of spirit. Adan's journey of self-reflection and redemption had just begun, but she was determined to make amends for her past mistakes and live her life in a way that honored the lessons Arinze had taught her through his unwavering love and humility. The afternoon following her heartfelt apologies to her servants, Princess Adane embarked on a journey to her father's lands, determined to seek forgiveness from him as well. She knew that her actions had deeply disappointed King Chukwuemeka, who had warned her against marrying Prince Ukandu solely for wealth and status. As Adan approached the palace gates, she gathered the courage to face her father's wrath. She summoned all the guards, servants and maids who had once served her before her marriage to Ukandu. Without hesitation, Adan knelt before them, a gesture of humility and remorse. "I have wronged each and every one of you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I treated you with disrespect and cruelty, blinded by my own selfish desires. I beg for your forgiveness and understanding." The guards and servants exchanged bewildered glances, unaccustomed to seeing the princess in such a vulnerable state. They had witnessed her arrogance and entitlement firsthand, and her sudden change of heart left them stunned. From afar, King Chukwuemeka spotted the commotion and came to investigate. He was searching for his guards and servants, unaware that they had gathered at Adan's request. As he approached, he saw his daughter, once a proud and entitled princess, kneeling before her former subjects, reduced to a state of humility. Moved by the sight, King Chukwuemeka stepped forward, his heart softening towards his daughter. He had once been furious with her for disobeying his advice and marrying Ukandu, but now he saw a woman who had learned from her mistakes and was truly remorseful. Without hesitation, the king embraced his daughter, tears welling in his eyes. Adan, overcome with emotion, voiced her sincere apologies. "Father, I am sorry for everything. I disobeyed you and followed a selfish path, driven by greed and a desire for status. I have learned from my mistakes, and I vow to live a better life, one guided by humility and kindness." The next morning, the day set for Arinze to embark on his journey to the forest to gather the final items for the cleansing ritual. The high priest arrived at Arinze's home. Accompanied by Chief Uzo, the high priest came to fortify Arinze and send him off on his important mission. After receiving the necessary blessings and instructions, Arinze set out on his journey, unaware of the sinister plot that had been hatched against him. As soon as Arinze departed, the high priest secretly alerted Prince Ukandu that the time had come to execute their plan. Ukandu swiftly dispatched his 3 most loyal guards, instructing them to ambush and kill Arinze in the forest. The guards followed Arinze's trail, tracking him into the dense woods. If you want to see how the story ended, write "continue" in the comments so we can finish the last part of this story. Subscribe so you don't miss the end of the story. You will be amazed by how this beautiful story turns out. If you want to see how the story ended, write "continue" in the comments so we can finish the last part of this story. Subscribe so you don't miss the end of the story. You will be amazed by how this beautiful story turns out.